right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're just so grateful to have you all here. And I know traffic is a little bit crazy this afternoon, so we may have some more folks coming in. But it's great to have you here, and we are so grateful to participate. Again, I'm Pastor Reese, and so much thanks to Alexia for organizing these events. I think this is better. For organizing for us, and we're here to continue to learn and to be great stewards. And it just doesn't stop at budgeting, but it can go so much further. And we're so grateful to have the knowledge and the skills and the individuals who are here this afternoon. So before we begin, we're just going to have a short word of prayer. Then I'll ask Alexia to come forward and just introduce our guests, and then we can jump right into it. All right? So please stand to your feet. Dear Lord, we are so thankful to you this afternoon for guiding us safely on the highways, keeping us to be here this moment. We thank you, Lord, for the knowledge that you have given your people, and we are praying this afternoon that everything that is said will be of benefit and that we will use it and that we'll be stewards, oh God, of the resources that you have given us. We thank you for our guests today. Bless us one and all. Remember those that are coming on their way. Keep them safe and bring them safely, Lord, I pray. And for those that may be joining online, I pray, oh God, that we'll walk away, Lord, with additional knowledge that we can put to use. We just want to say thank you in advance. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay. Testing. Thank you, Pastor Reese. So thank you all once again for being here. It has been a great couple of weeks. I know we are a little, missing some folks, but they're on the way. And God will bring them here safely. Can you hear me well through this microphone? Okay. They can hear? Okay, wonderful. And so I just wanted to just recap. So we have gone through from budgeting to our goals, financial goals, to our reading our credit reports and things of that nature. How are we doing with everything? How are we doing with budgeting? Have you done your budgets? Have you been working diligently on your budgets? Yes? And we're looking like we're in the green, right? The laughter gives it away. But, one of the things that, I talked about earlier is that when we think about financial management, like money management, we think budget, we think credit, we think all those things, but we never quite follow through with the additional steps that we need to take to make sure that we're covered in all area. One of them that we talked about, estate planning, right? A lot of times we just chop that off. We leave that off thinking, okay, once we've worked hard, once we have all these assets, once we have done the work for many years, then we just magically, things just pass along to the next generation, right? And our assets are protected, right? Our investments, our retirement is already planned out. We have to do the work to plan that in. So I am super excited about this particular session that I've told everyone, make sure you are present for, make sure you come in for, because this is the icing, right, on all the hard work, the estate planning portion, which we have Ms. Charlene Green. So I thank you so much for coming out today and just sharing the information and sharing your knowledge with us, because, again, this is a piece that people tend to forget. You know, they tend to forget that you have to put things in place. And we also have from Edward Jones, Mr. Jason Witcher. So thank you so much for coming this way. It's going to help us to understand what the market is looking like, investments, and just, what are your plans for retirement? Do you have plans to retire? Back in the day, we used to think about our children being the retirement plan. Guess what? That's not a plan, because our children are living in the age of protect my peace. Protect my peace, and they're living for themselves, which they're not wrong, right? They're not wrong. So we have to make sure that we have things in place to protect ourselves. So I'm going to invite Ms. Charlene Green to come up and just start speaking. Again, people will be rolling in, so just continue. And any questions that we have online, Pastor Reese will definitely, bring that to you. Okay? Thank you. Give her a warm welcome, everyone. Okay. We'll switch them out. So speak into the mic, because that's the only way they will hear you.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Okay. So I want to stand to the side so that you can see the slide Green, and thank you, Pastor Reese, for the invitation, and Alexia. On this beautiful Sunday afternoon, we're here. We're going to talk about. I like talking about estate planning. I mean, I know it's not the most sexiest topic. It's not fun, but it certainly is essential. And really, when you get into it, I always say estate planning is more not about your passing. It's more about the folks that you leave behind, about their life and the quality of their life, and what it is your vision for your family is. So, Pastor Reese, if you'll go on to the next slide, please. You can skip ahead to a couple of slides. All right. Okay. So you can go ahead and skip ahead a couple, and we'll just yeah. So right there is good. So I like to start off by whenever I do a basic, I meet a group for the first time. I like to start off with what is an estate, because that's a question I get often. A lot of folks will come to me and they'll say, well, I don't have an estate, or I don't know what an estate is, or I'm not rich, I don't have a lot. And that's just kind of the general consensus, is there's this a lot of misinformation about what an estate is and what I'm supposed to do with it and what does it mean and all that. So I like to start there and with what an estate is. And basically what an estate is everything that you own when you pass away. So if you go ahead with some of those examples there, it's regardless of the size or the amount. So folks get hung up on how much money they have in the bank, or whether they have any money, or the size of their house and things like that. But it's literally everything, everything you own. So your bank accounts, and I'm meeting a lot of folks with a lot of money in bank accounts, actually. I've had some retirees that have sold properties in other states, and they literally just have this money just sitting there, hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting there in the bank account. So that's stuff that you're going to want to make sure you plan for, and that is also you want to think about protecting it. Your investment accounts, your stock accounts. On to the next slide, please. And so you also have the big things that most of us are aware of, like your house, your car. That's a big, most of us are homeowners. That's the number one asset that I find that gets a lot of people tripped up. You have a house, you haven't planned for it, accurately. You have, a couple children, and then there's all this confusion about what happens to the house when, who gets it, who has the right to live in it. And I've seen a lot of breakdowns over a house. So make sure you do plan. If you're a homeowner, don't take that for granted. That's usually outside of a retirement account or a life insurance policy, that's usually the largest asset, and it's worth planning for that. Because there's no point in your family fighting over, this one asset. Some want to sell, some don't want to sell. And you can't have more than one person really living in the house. If you have multiple kids, you want to think about what you want to have with this house. So that's come up a lot recently, so I'd just like to say that life insurance policies, retirement accounts, those as well, those are really, really important to plan for. So a lot of wealth is also tied up in life insurance. I mean, you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars in these life insurance policies, and a lot of folks will just place a beneficiary on that. And so, when you do that, that money's going out to the beneficiary. Well, if you know that that beneficiary is not in a position, or not, the most fiscally responsible person, there's no reason just to leave this money outright to them. So there's a way with planning to take care of your loved ones and protect them from themselves, from irresponsible decisions they could make, as well as protect the asset and protect, the funds, so that it's there for them as they go on. So there's a way to plan for all of your assets so that you can transfer it to the next generation. They can have the benefit of it, but then you can also make sure that it'll be there for a while. And if you have particular goals that you want to accomplish, all of that, that's kind of the purpose of planning. So I want to start talking a little bit about the importance of financial organization. Next slide, please. So when someone comes to me and when you're thinking about planning, and this is something you can do right now. So I like to give you actionable steps about how do we start? How do we start with planning? So the first thing is you want to get organized, financially organized, and that's really, really important. This is where you're starting. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You can do it on a spreadsheet. You can just do it on a piece of paper. Next slide, please. But you want to start thinking about what you're worth. right? You want to start thinking about how much debt I have, what the value of my assets are, where they're located. You kind of just want to take out a sheet and just write everything down. So your house, start with the big items. If you have a mortgage on it, you want to have the mortgage information. Everyone should have like a checklist that I send to everyone. So that's a good place where you can start. But for all of your items, you want to have your assets, the value, where they're located. That's really, really important, especially if you have assets that are located in other states, if you own multiple homes, timeshares, things like that. Just make sure that you have all that located, because something happens to you, especially if something happens to you suddenly, someone has to come behind you, and that's going to be your family, and they've got to put your entire life together and try to figure out where all your assets are. And if it isn't written down anywhere, and if they don't have an understanding, this is how things get lost. So first place to start is organization. Get everything written down, what you have, also what you owe. And understanding that will give you an idea of how much wealth you're able to leave behind, and hopefully it'll be wealth. Some people are carrying a lot of debt, and you want to think about that too, because your estate has to pay debt. So let's say you have a lot of credit card bills, medical bills, things like that. You have an asset, maybe a house. Well, depending on how much your debts are, that house may not be able to transfer to your loved ones if you have a lot of debt. So it's good to understand that going in, so that you know how to plan, and so your family knows what's going on. I've had clients come in and they're like, oh, we've got this house, we've got a small estate, and they're expecting to get a return. Then we file an estate, and all these claims keep coming in, and we're like, yeah, you're gonna have to sell this house to pay this debt. And they're like, no, this is our house. The creditors come first. You got to pay the debts of the estate. So it's good to understand that. So keep that in a particular location. And also I want to talk about beneficiary designations. And so for your life insurance, retirement accounts, even bank accounts, if you can put a beneficiary on there, go ahead and do that. It's really, really important. But also make sure you check that periodically. So I've had folks who have life insurance policies, they'll put a beneficiary on there 20 years ago and they never check it. And then they pass away and it's a mom that's already passed away. Or it's an ex-spouse. I've had that happen too. Or, and it's just like, make sure you're double checking these things on a periodic basis so that you know who's going to get your assets. And this is, things change as your children get older as well. The rule of thumb is do not put minors on, as a beneficiary. Anyone under 18 does not make a good beneficiary. You want to create a plan and have a trust and make the trust the beneficiary for the children. But as soon as your children get older, then you can start putting them on, when they get more responsible and things like that. So also disabled individuals aren't good candidates to be direct beneficiaries, because that could impact their ability to receive government assistance. So be sure that you're checking your beneficiary designations periodically. Be sure that you're notating, you're updating where your assets are located, what the values of those assets are, and especially if it's assets that are hard to value, like artwork or family heirlooms and things like that. Be sure that you're taking special care to notate what they are, what they're valued. Give your family members some indication of the value, because those are the things, once you're gone, they're valuable to you, but those are things that end up in the trash or given away or at an estate sale. And so, make sure you're taking particular care of those. All right, so then we want to talk a little bit about probatable assets and your probatable estate. So not everything has to go through probate. Let's say you have a house. There's a way to transfer your house now, even without, just by using a deed. They have a transfer and death deed. You also have joint tenants with rights to survivorship deed. So there's a way to transfer assets without necessarily going through probate. And of course, all of your assets that have a beneficiary on there, like your bank accounts, your life insurance, those assets will transfer outright to those beneficiaries. They do not go through probate. So you don't necessarily have to have a probatable estate if you do a good job planning to avoid probate. And of course, you can do more comprehensive planning that absolutely avoids probate. But there's a lot you can do on your own to make sure that you're well organized. But in terms of your taxable estate, it's the difference between your taxable estate and your probatable estate. So your probatable estates are those assets that have to go through probate because either they don't have a beneficiary on there or they don't transfer by operation of law. So in order to free up the asset, for example, if you pass away and you're the only one on the title of your home, well, that has to go somewhere. And the only way to free it up, either you transfer it, and if you're gone, you'll need to petition a court to transfer it, for the estate to transfer it. So that's how things like your home will end up in probate. So I always advise people, if you have a home, definitely make sure you're looking into doing some planning, because houses don't transfer by the other rules that other assets transfer by. So you want to keep that in mind. As far as your taxable estate, the estate exemptions, the federal tax estate exemptions are very high right now. So, overwhelming majority of us, 99.9% of us, don't have to worry about that. But there's a lot of things that we can still do to plan to avoid probate if that's one of our goals. And Georgia's not a terrible probate state. I mean, you can make your way through probate. I say if you have planning, you don't necessarily have to avoid probate depending on what your circumstances are, but you certainly want to make sure that you sit down and you know what your family's going to be up against and you're not making assumptions. Okay, so now we're going to get into what is estate planning, and what's the purpose of planning. So we talked about an estate, and you understand that everything you own, your house, your car, your bank accounts, all that's your estate. So we all have an estate here, right? So we're never going to say, oh, I don't have anything. I don't have anything to plan for. We all have something that we want to plan for. Now, you don't have to plan. There is a plan in place, a default plan, so to speak. The state has a plan. So if you don't do a plan. But so I always say you do not have to plan. But if you want to be in the driver's seat, and sometimes we think we know what that plan is, because I had folks come to me and they'll say all kinds of crazy things, or like, I just assumed that the property was going to transfer to me when, the person passed. I guess it's not crazy. It's just, it's just what they assumed. And I just thought to myself, well, why would you just assume that without finding out before the person passed away? And that can cause a lot of issues, especially with a couple. I have one case right now. This woman was married for a number of years, but her spouse had an older child. The spouse was the only one on title. He passed away, and she was one that I'll never forget. She just was like so upset. She was like, I just assumed the house would be mine. I said, no, it's 50% yours and 50% this girl that you don't know, that you don't talk to. So start talking to her. Start talking to her, and yeah, that's one. And I've never seen where it hasn't been a problem. And it has been a year and a half, and we're still trying to work through that, and it's not coming out well for her. So make sure you don't make those assumptions. But what planning is, as far as your estate goes, once you understand what you have and you're pretty organized and you're thinking about what it is you want to. So a lot of folks come to me and they really haven't given a thought to what I want, how do I want my estate to be divided? You basically can divide your estate however you choose. If you have children, you don't have to do it equally. Now that is the default rule. So if you don't make a plan, your estate will be divided among your heirs. So if you have spouse and children, some will go to your spouse and some will go to your children in equal shares. But a lot of people who are planning don't necessarily want it to be equal, and it doesn't have to be if you're planning. So, I've had folks there's one child who maybe shows a little bit more attention, especially for my older clients. There's one child who's maybe living with them and has given up, quite a bit to take care of them, so they want to make sure that this child is taken care of, and that's fine. You can do that. Also, if you want to donate to a charity like a church, you have to actually do that plan, and that is definitely not going to be automatic. So any charitable donations you want to do, that has to be proactively done in your planning. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. But that's the last part of planning, is deciding who gets what. The first part of planning is making sure you have it written down, what you have. The second is designating individuals who are going to step in and take care of whatever it is you need to take care of, either while you're alive, An often overlooked part of estate planning is disability planning or incapacity planning. So folks, when they think about estate planning, they're like, okay, it's when I die. But a lot can happen before you pass away that could significantly impact what you have, left to go to your heirs. So you want to make sure that you put someone in charge, a financial agent with a financial power of attorney. That's really, really important, even among spouses. So, if you're married, your spouse does not have the legal right to transact business on your behalf, even though you're married. Even though you may have assets co-owned, they don't have the legal right to do that. And most of the times, that does not become aware or important until one spouse doesn't have the capacity. And then you're stuck in a position where if they have accounts that you're not on, you're locked out of them. And then you realize, well, I can't do anything for them. If they're alive, you can go ahead and, interchangeably do things. But you want to make sure that you're the primary financial agent for your spouse and that they are the primary financial agent for you, and that is in writing. And you also want to designate backup agents, because if something happens to both of you, there needs to be someone there who can have access to your accounts, pay your bills, transact business on your behalf. That's really, really important. So a part of planning is also to take care of incapacity. When you get older, you're still alive, but you're not in a position to manage your financial affairs. And the second half of that is the healthcare power of attorney. So as a couple, your spouse is your default healthcare agent. So if you're sick, you're in the hospital, the doctors will go to your spouse to ask about medical decisions that have to be made, up to pulling the plug. But you also want to designate backup agents, because it could be a situation where both of you are in a position that you can't make decisions. And you also want to make your end-of-life decisions, too. Do you want to be kept alive? Do you want to have, do you want to have a natural death? Let's go ahead and make those decisions, because that makes the process so much easier for your family members, okay? So the idea is you want your agent to be communicating what it is you want at the end of your life, rather than them making that decision under a situation where folks are, you're ill, everyone is emotional, people may not, at that point in time, they're not thinking clearly. So you make these decisions ahead of time, so all that's happened is your agent's just communicating it. So your financial power of attorney, very, very important. Your healthcare power of attorney, very, very important. Your HIPAA form, right? So you can go ahead of time and designate, give your healthcare agents the authorization to have access to your medical records, because if you're in that position where you're unconscious, you're in the hospital, you don't have the capacity to give them at that point the authorization to get your medical records. They may need it to make some tough decisions. So you want to do all of that ahead of time. That's all under the umbrella of incapacity planning. And then if we have some time, we're going to get to long-term care planning, which is also super, super important for our seniors. And that's another goal of estate planning. So incapacity planning is one, death planning is another, long-term care planning. So all of that is under the umbrella of estate planning. But what's common, of course, we think about estate plan is making sure that you've designated an executor or a trustee to manage your financial affairs once you've passed away, and then to distribute your estate. So all of that is the planning and the preparing part of estate planning. So we're going to go through this fairly quickly. And so that's basics, right? What we discussed before, making sure you've taken care of your financial power of attorney, your healthcare power of attorney, your HIPAA, you at least have a will that designates someone to wrap up your affairs and distribute your estate. That's basic estate planning. Every adult should have all of these in place, okay? But if you're wanting to make sure that you have, you're planning for life, you're planning for the success of your family, you want to go a little bit further. And if you have minor children, depending on who you're planning for, you're going to want to make sure you take special care, because minor children under 18, children under 18, and of course the younger they are, they're not able to manage their financial affairs. So you're going to have to, that's when at least a trust will come into play, right? So in addition to having your will, even if you go the will-based route, you will have some sort of trust built in if you have minor children. You also will need to designate guardians if you have minor children. Super important, right? So if you know parents with children under 18, it's super important for them to, at some point, taken at some time to think about who they want to raise their children if something were to happen to them. Because this is how the children end up in the system, with the state, because decisions haven't been made. If you have a minor and you pass away, and you have not designated an agent, a guardian, the courts will designate. This is something that must happen. So, of course, we don't want to think about, parents passing and leaving their children behind, but this happens. This is a reality. So, every parent needs to make sure that they have designated an agent, guardian for their children. And then also, you also want to designate, because children aren't able to manage their financial affairs, so they also want to designate a trustee, right? Because if you're a parent, a two-parent household, and you pass away and you have minor children, everything you have will belong to them, everything, but they won't be able to touch any of it. So this is how things end up in the system. Folks go to especially if you pass away and you had you had assets and there are minors involved, you're going to have the entire family coming out the woodworks, petition the court to be over their financial affairs. And it may be someone, the courts may decide on someone because they don't know your family, and everybody's presenting the best picture of themselves, so the court has to decide who's going to be in charge of your children's financial affairs. So that's always something that you should be in charge of, designating who raised your children and who takes care of them financially. That's all something you can do with extensive planning. You can also, with planning, protect, not just transfer assets to the next generation, but you can protect it. So you can transfer it in a form that your heirs, your children, will be able to use it for a long period of time. It'll be protected from creditors. It'll be protected from greedy ex-spouses. So you can transfer your estate in a way that protects not just them, but also... Is this better? Okay. So you can transfer your estate in a way that protects them, protects it from themselves if they're not financially responsible, but also protects it from life circumstances that can also happen. And so some of the other beneficiaries that you want to make special plan for are beneficiaries that have disabilities. So anyone that has a disability, as long as they're getting government assistance. So we're talking about government assistance like Medicaid, Social Security income. You want to be very careful about leaving assets to individuals that are getting need-based government assistance. So I'm hearing some feedback. Is that? I don't know if this is better. But you guys can hear me, right? Okay. All right, so you want to be very careful. And so, of course, for minor children, special planning needs to be taken care of, and also if you have disabled or individuals getting government assistance. And this also applies to seniors as well, because sometimes they're on Medicaid or they're getting Social Security income. So you don't want to leave assets outright to anyone that's getting that kind of government assistance, because it could interfere with their ability to continue to receive it. So with the rest of this part of the presentation, if you have a small business, if you're self-employed, you're going to want to make sure that you're taking special care to think about how your family is going to fare if you don't have, if they're losing your income. So that's where life insurance comes in. I'm going to let Jason take care of that. He's much more qualified to talk about that than I am. But these are really, really important to make sure that your family has what they need if you become incapacitated while you're alive and you're not able to continue to support them, or God forbid you pass away and they've lost your income for forever. So those are things you're going to want to make sure that you take care of. Okay, so what happens if you pass away and you don't have a plan? So I alluded to this earlier. You can keep going, Pastor. the state has a plan. The state has a plan for you whether you pass away. I'm sorry, if you're alive. As remember, I mentioned that you could be alive and not in a position to take care of yourself. So if you're incapacitated, that process is called guardianship or conservatorship. And you hear about that sometimes in the news, like with Wendy Williams, she's going through that. Britney Spears was another one who had a conservatorship for a very long period of time. So those are situations where the courts had to step in with, those high-profile cases. We're wondering about, I don't know, if there weren't family members that were qualified. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a financial power of attorney in place, if you haven't designated a financial agent, and you are in a position where you can't manage your financial affairs, if you've lost the ability to convey that authority on someone else, then the only other alternative is for the court to convey that authority on someone. So that leaves your family members going through the guardianship, conservatorship process to get that authority over you. It's a very lengthy process. It requires you to file yearly updates, yearly financial statements. It's extremely cumbersome, and so you don't want to do that to any of your family members. Make sure that you've designated a financial agent and a healthcare agent. So a guardianship is when you're in a position you can't make any decisions for yourself. So you basically become a kid again. And someone is appointed by the court to make all decisions: where you live, where you eat, where you stay, what you wear when you go to the doctor. It's a very, it's an all-encompassing thing. And a conservatorship is someone is put over your financial affairs. And so you have absolutely no control over your finances. Every single penny has to go through them. Now, they do have to report how they're spending your funds, but you have no control over it. And so, of course, there are situations where, in a senior, I've had, 90-year-olds where, I've had family members come and say, well, this is necessary. And sometimes it is, but there's a lot of, there's a lot of things that can go on there. So anytime you can avoid this process by making sure you've done affirmative planning, this is something you want to do. And of course, probate is the process that you'll have to go through if you have a will and there are assets to be probated, or if you don't have a will. Although Georgia's process is fairly streamlined, there's still time associated with it. So on average, I would say in just about all the counties, especially the metro counties like DeKalb and Fulton, it's probably gonna take a year to go through the entire process. And this is just if there's we're not talking about any objections, we're talking about a straight, streamline, plan for at a minimum 9 months. Because the probate process is just the first part where you get the authorization from the court. But then you also have at a minimum 4 months after that, where you have to notify the creditors, pay out all the debts, wait 90 days to make sure no creditors come forward, and then you can distribute the estates to the heirs or the beneficiaries. So there's always going to be a time associated with probate. And that's one of the reasons why you'll plan to, to avoid the probate process. Right, so one of the ways that you can, that we'll focus now on going forward on death planning is with a will or a trust. And so the will is, of course, one way that you can distribute. Both the will and the trust are ways to transfer your assets to the next generation. With the will, it's probably the most common form. It goes back ages. And when we're talking about a will, we're talking about the last will and testament. So sometimes folks will call me and they say, I want a live-in will. So a live-in will is not the last will and testament. A live-in will is a healthcare directive tool. So a live-in will is where you lay out how you want your assets, how you want to be treated if you have a terminal illness, if you want to have your natural death, or you want your life extended. So that's what a live-in will is. It's an advanced directive tool. The last will and testament is the document where you lay out how you want your assets to be distributed. So at a minimum, these two are used interchangeably, and they're not. So we're going to be talking about the last will and testament. And with the last will and testament, some things that you want to, some of the components is keep in mind it only goes into effect once you pass away. So once you do your will, it is of no effect while you're alive. You can make changes to it, but it goes into effect while when you pass. You appoint an executor, someone to be over it. You basically lay out how you want your assets to be distributed when you pass away. Next slide. The will also is public. So once you probate the will with the petition, it's now a part of the court records. It can be checked by anyone. It stays there forever, as Jackie Onassis' will is. So if you want to bypass, especially that public process, and keep everything private, you may want to go with a trust. And with a trust, you also you designate a trustee. You're able to, it stays private. You're able to manage assets in many different areas. So let's say you have a house in Florida, you have a house in Georgia, you have a house in New York. Depending on the, whether you have a mortgage on it and things like that. The idea with a trust is to get all of this out of your name and into one vehicle. Because outside of that, you're going to be doing probate in Georgia if you passed away here, but then you got to go to Florida where you have property, you got to go to New York, wherever else, and you have to probate in all of those states, or at least notify the courts and get the ball rolling. So Georgia may have a streamlined process, but those other states may not. And so you're just adding time and delay to the process if you have assets that are kind of, in multiple different locations. So one of the reasons why you would use a trust is if you have assets in different locations. Another reason, of course, is to keep it private. If you have concerns about family members that don't get along, or if you're disinheriting folks, I wouldn't go through the probate process or utilize a will if I'm going to disinherit some of my heirs, because when you go through the probate process, you have to contact all of them. And I have had probate process held up for months, almost a year, because an heir didn't want to be contacted, they didn't want to be bothered, or they objected just because they were being disinherited. And so when you're going through the probate process actually asks for objections. So when you present in a will to a court, the court doesn't know anything about this individual. So you have to reach out to all of their heirs and say, hey, this is the will. Do you have a problem with it? Well, if they don't get along, or you're leaving them out, or they had a problem with you, they can just go ahead and slow down the process just because they have no incentive not to. So I always say, if you know there are going to be disputes after you pass away, or you have a contentious family, make sure you take the family dynamics into account when you are doing your planning. Make sure you take everything you know about your beneficiary. If you know your children, or you have one child and they don't manage money well, don't just get them outright. I mean, there's no reason to do that. Like, you can plan so that they can be taken care of, but they also have the tools in place so that the money or whatever you've left behind can be used for their benefit. So, and the trust is a great way to be able to utilize that. So some of the reasons why you wouldn't want to use a trust: one, it's usually more expensive. I would say in all cases, it's a more expensive way to plan than going the will-based way. Another is that you still may need a will. For example, if you have minor children, the process of nominating your guardian, which you have to do, like I mentioned, if you have minor children, that has to go through the court. So you still may need a will. Also, having a trust is just an agreement that you enter into while you're alive, but you still need to go through the process of connecting your assets. And that's why I see a lot of individuals, where the process falls down, they may be able to go online and put something together, but they don't then carry out the process of what's called funding the trust or connecting the assets to the trust. The whole purpose of the trust is to make sure that you're taking assets out of your name. You're essentially doing your probate. You're taking assets out of your name while you're alive, putting them in this vehicle that will continue after you pass away, so that your loved ones don't have to go through the trouble of getting assets out of your name and then transferring it. So it's really, really important to make sure that you are connecting assets. And Georgia's a fairly probate-friendly state, so in some cases, a trust may not be necessary.
So quick question, for transferring assets into a trust, Is it just simply a form? You say you designate that this asset, let's use a car, is now titled or belongs to the trust. Is it that simple, or is it more complicated than that?
It can be more complicated. It typically is. Different class of assets, there are different ways to connect it to the trust. For example, with a house, you have to redo the deed. Typically with a car, we don't change the title. With other assets, we can use beneficiary designations like we talked about. So just like you can put an individual on as a beneficiary, you can put a trust as a beneficiary. So there are different ways of connecting assets to to a trust. And you want to make sure that you're following those rules to get them properly transferred. All right, so here we have some of the key differences. One, of course, the will has to go through the probate process. The trust really remains private. You have a lot more control with the trust, how to distribute. For example, wills are designed because the probate process, the courts don't want to be involved, with your estate being open for years and years, although that does end up happening. So if you have a situation where, like especially with the minor child, where they can't start even having access to it at 18, and in most cases, most parents don't even want their 18-year-old to have access to their entire inheritance, so you'd want it to extend even beyond that. A trust is just going to be the tool that you use to do that. So you'll go through the probate process in the beginning to get the authorization from the court, then everything will be transferred to the trust, and then the trust then manages it into 10, 15, 20 years into the future. So you can also create a trust at the onset. Live-in trust that goes in effect when you create it, and then you can transfer your assets to it, and once you pass away, your trustee immediately has the authority to continue to manage it for however long you've laid out in a trust for the assets to be managed for the beneficiary. All right, so this is just another little snapshot here about the difference between the wills and the trust, but because we're kind of crunched on time, and I want to get to the long-term care section. I'm going to get through, leave it out there for like 30 more seconds, then we're going to get to the next slide. So I added this part to my slides because most of the times when I'm talking, although I got into estate planning to plan for children, parents with minor children, I end up more times in front of my seniors. And so I wanted to make sure that I'm touching on this because this is a very important topic. So this really has to do with long-term care. So I start off by saying estate planning has several different goals. One, to plan for incapacity. You do that with your financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney. Of course, death planning, you have your will, your trust, but long-term care planning is also a goal of estate planning, and that's really important. So long-term care plan is designed to answer the question, how do you pay for care towards the end of your life? Or sometimes you don't even have to be a senior, but you're hit with a debilitating condition where you're not able to take care of yourself. So ADLs are affected, and either you need in-home care, which can be very costly, or you have to go to a nursing home, or maybe because Alzheimer's, dementia, memory issues on a rise, you may have to go to assisted living. So all of these can be very costly and can significantly impact your savings. If you have money in the bank, if you have your retirement, you may have to sell your house, a lot of things. So we can have this very well laid out plan for how much of your estate you want to transfer, and then you're hit with a condition that you may have to deplete a lot of that if there was no planning, so that you can take care of yourself, because of course you have to take care of yourself. And sometimes that burden without adequate planning falls on your adult children. So I'm getting calls from adult children saying, oh, my mom or dad has to go into the nursing home, and they're telling us they're going to take the house, they're, all these things, and they're afraid and don't know what to do. So one of the pre-planning we can do is with a MAT. So what a MAT is a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. And it's a way to shelter your assets so that you can qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid has has a long-term care component to it. So I want to differentiate this from Medicare because this is often confused. So Medicare is typically health insurance, right? So they pay for your doctor's visits. Now Medicare also has different components, different parts, and some parts can pay for long-term care in a limited sense. And so it's a good idea for any seniors to make sure you get with someone who understands Medicare very well and can explain to you all of the options that you have under Medicare, because most of the individuals that I'm coming across are not taking advantage of all that Medicare has to offer. So make sure that you're doing that. And there are folks who specialize in explaining to you all your options with Medicare. So that's one. But then if we have some time, we can put into place what's called a MAT, which is an irrevocable trust. So it's a different type of trust, but the sole goal of this trust is to shelter your assets. So it's to cover it so that it doesn't count, Medicaid won't count it against you. And you don't have to worry about recovery, and you can qualify to go into care. And this can be one of the ways that you can possibly pay for nursing home care. Now, they won't pay for assisted living, but in some instances, they will pay with a waiver for in-home care. And that, of course, if they're picking up the tab, means that you have more funds that you can keep in your bank account, keep your house, things like that, so that your loved ones can get exactly what you intend for them to get. So so this is some of the benefits. You can still utilize the assets. So one of the benefits of having the MAT is that you can utilize the assets. You can still live in the house, although you'll have to give it away. You'll have to give up the asset to the trust, and your children or whomever you decide is going to benefit after you pass away, they will essentially become the owner of the asset, but you still have the right to live in the house for the rest of your life, and nobody can interfere with that. So that's a provision with this particular type of trust. You're also, if you have money in the bank that you want to shelter, you can commit that, you can gift it to the trust, but if it generates income, your trustee you can possibly utilize that income and still use that while you're alive, although you will have to be comfortable with giving up the principal. So you can still utilize the income. You still get to choose who the beneficiaries are, because it's your asset. So if it's your children, if it's someone else, you get to decide that. So this is just going through the various. And one of the benefits, I want to stop here, about the creditor protection. So because it's an irrevocable trust, unlike just a straight estate plan and trust that's just transferring your asset, this particular type of trust, because it's designed to shelter your assets from your creditors, once you create it, it also can't be touched. So if you're going through, because you've given it away, it's not considered yours anymore. So it's an interesting kind of position to be in, where you do get some limited benefits of it, but you don't own it. You also don't control it. So it's an interesting position. You also get the step-up basis. So there's some benefits from having it, but you have to be in a position or be comfortable with the lack of control and the lack of ownership. In exchange for that, after 5 years, Medicaid won't count it against you. So there will be no Medicaid recovery. So this is just another way that you can utilize, another avenue that you can utilize to pay for long-term care if you were in that position. So with the timing is everything, that's just saying you need that 5 years. So if we create, you can't wait until you're in the nursing home to then create the MAT. Because any transfers that you've done in 5 years, and this is any transfer, because folks will sometimes say, well, I'll just transfer my house to my child. Well, if you've done it within that 5-year period, that transfer is going to count against you. Medicaid's not going to look like it. You still own it as if you never transferred it, although you don't. Legally you have, but you'll be barred from applying for Medicaid for a 5-year period, and you'll have to pay out of pocket or utilize some other method. And this is where insurance comes in as well. I always advise my clients, I think insurance is probably And the best way to cover all of these um, gaps, I call in your estate plan, whether it's estate planning, whether it's, disability, you get in, you're disabled during your lifetime or after you pass away or for long-term care. Those insurance is a great way to make sure that you have some available cash that can pay for any of these care. With insurance, you want to make sure that they have living benefits built in so you can tap into it to pay for things like long-term care or medication or in-home care or that type of thing. But if all else fails, I'm sometimes getting clients in their 70s and late 70s. Insurance is not an option at that point. And so we may have to look into things like, the Medicaid trust, and you may be in a position where you're having to give up your ownership and your control to put yourself in a better position that you can transfer something to your children. So I think that's pretty much it. So if we have any questions, we'll take them now.
Is the estate planning or the MAPT, all of that, pretty much the same for states, different states? Like my mother lives in Maryland, and so I'm helping her with hers. Would I kind of expect the same things as the information that you're sharing here today?
So on a whole, it is the same, but every state has different variations of it. There's a will, there's a trust, the MAT. MAT is actually a federal program because Medicaid is federal. Each state, though, promulgates laws to govern Medicaid in their state. So the implementation of it may be a little different. They may have different rules, but across the board, the 5-year look back, those things are the same. And you can do a MAT in every state. You can do a trust in every state. You can have a will in every state. So yes, across the board, there's the basic information here is the same. But you're going to want to check with local council to make sure that you're addressing the needs of your mom in that particular state. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? One more time. Yeah, you actually have many different type of trusts. But in the two that I discussed here today, most people, when we're thinking about trust, they're thinking about the revocable living trust. They're thinking about the trust that they create while they're alive, and that gives them full control still of all the assets, and they're not giving up anything, right? So you create the trust, you connect your assets to the trust, but you still own it, you're still in control of it, and only when you pass away does, go on to your children or someone else comes in like a successor trustee. So that's normally what we're thinking about when we say trust. But the irrevocable trust products you want to use sparingly, and for those individual situations, like one, if we're planning for long-term care, you can use the MAT that we just talked about. If you have a disabled individual that's getting Social Security income, Medicaid, you can create a standalone, what's called special needs trust or supplemental needs trust, and that's an irrevocable trust as well. So you can create irrevocable trust for different situations to add to your plan once you've laid a foundational plan, and usually foundational plan is the revocable product. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Attorney Charlene Green. I appreciate you. So she has given us a wealth of information, right? And so with this information, we have to put it into action. I love actionable items. And so in front of you, you have a list. Don't just go home and throw that on the kitchen table, right? You have a list in front of you. I'm not talking to anyone in particular. However, if the shoe fits, but you have a list in front of you. Be sure to go through that list, right? And there's also some additional information, like an informational sheet that you can complete. And so when you reach out to Attorney Charlene, you will be able to have all your information. She'll be able to gather your information and know exactly who you are and what we need to discuss, because everyone's situation is going to be different, right? Sure. Okay. So complete them before you leave. So if you can do that, have that done. But this is important. This is an important topic. We've touched on a lot, and I definitely want you to think about everything that was said today. And so we're going to move on to our investments and speaking about what the market looks like. We're going to have Mr. Jason Witcher from Edward Jones. If you'll give him a round of applause to welcome him. Thank you so much, Jason, for your time today.
Morning or afternoon, definitely afternoon. It's been a long morning for me. So as I mentioned, or as Lexi mentioned, my name is Jason Witcher, and I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones. Do I need to move this up? Oh, there we go. I'll try to keep this up here. I normally speak loud enough. I don't need a microphone, but I understand. Probably need it for YouTube. That's all right. So who am I? Why am I here? My name is Jason. I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones. I've been in the industry for about 10 years now. I'm also a chartered retirement planning counselor. So retirement is kind of my baby. That's my forte. But with everybody's 401k, what do? We invest, right? So investments as a whole, the same principles that you apply in your 401k or investing, that way you can apply in any other type of account that you have. Is this going in?
Testing.
So, with that being said, much better, thank you. Who can tell me what the oldest financial resource book is that you can available? Anybody can go buy it today. The oldest financial resource book. I'll give y'all a hint. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We are in a church. Excellent. It is the Bible. So, you know, one big misconception that people have, what is the root of all evil? Boom, there we go. It is the love of money. It is not money itself. It is the love of money. That is what is the root of all evil. So, is money still important though? Absolutely is. It's a tool. We need to have it. Matter of fact, the Bible speaks specifically about money in a couple of different verses, and I like the fact that you mentioned earlier the example of a lot of people's retirement plans is what? Their children, right? Well, what's the Bible say about that? Anybody ever looked? I got it right here. I'll just read it here. 2 Corinthians 12:14. For children ought not lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. Whoops. Uh-oh. There goes that plan. Well, what are we supposed to do? Okay, if the children are not going to save for us, are we supposed to save for our children? Matter of fact, what's the Bible say about that? Proverbs 13:22 tells us that a good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children. Whoa, wait a minute. I thought I only had to save for my children. You mean you telling me I got to save for my children's children, my grandchildren? Hey, I didn't say it. So with that being said, I've got one more verse I'm going to throw at you here in just a second, but I'm going to get the pastor to help me out on this one. There is one thing in the Bible that tells you if you do not do this, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Pastor, that if you do not do this, that you are worse than an infidel. Don't work. You are 100% right, both of you here. I'm going to read the verse just to be diligent with it. 1 Timothy 5:8, but if any provideth not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. That didn't say who don't put in the tithe and collect and pay. Sorry, Pastor, I know this. I get it. But no, you got to provide for your own house. And the Bible tells us specifically how we are to do that. Leave an inheritance for our children's children. Provide for our families. So how do we do that? It's hard to do a lot these days because, I mean, working 9 to 5 and doing all this, things get expensive, right? So we have to plan and we have to invest. There's no way to be able to do that. I don't know about you guys, but I don't make enough to provide for my children's children right now. I got to put something aside for them. And there's a big difference between saving and investing. Who cares to take a shot at what that is? Saving, I know we had a session on this a little while ago, right? Saving's putting your money aside. I always give the shoebox analogy. I got the shoebox over here. I'm putting money in my shoebox. I'm saving it. I'm putting it aside. Well, with that being said, if I'm putting it in the shoebox, is it doing anything for me besides collecting dust? Absolutely not. Matter of fact, with inflation, ooh, that's a bad word. Especially a couple years ago, right? Think about it like this. If you took $1,000 today, you drop it in a shoebox and you bury it in your backyard, and nobody touches it, when you go back out there 1 year from today, what are you going to have? You're going to have $1,000 in the shoebox, right? I have saved my $1,000. But here's my question to you. Are you going to be able to buy the same amount of stuff with that $1,000 as you could today? Absolutely not. Right now, approximately, you'd be able to buy about 4% less. That's just based on how inflation is. A couple of years ago, that was actually 9-10% less. So how do we make up that big 9-10% difference there? In investing. So I'm going to go down here. Investing involves taking a little bit of risk. Ooh, that sounds bad too. Who wants to risk losing their money? Well, nobody wants to risk losing their money, but unfortunately that's a necessary thing that we have to do. So the play to do it is make sure that you have a plan in place. And the document that you guys have in front of you from Edward Jones, y'all can set that one down to the side for a second. We're going to talk about that in just a second, but first I'm going to run down Edward Jones's investing principles and rules of the road. So no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to bore you guys reading this point by point. I'm going to give you my little spin on each one of them as well. So, first thing, if we're going to take a risk, wouldn't it be smart to have a plan? Yeah, absolutely. First one is you got to develop your strategy. Step one, develop that strategy. So, as I tell people a lot of times when you're developing this plan or developing this strategy, the first thing you got to do is what? Well, before I know where I'm going, I got to know where I'm at, right? So these principles, like Alexi was saying a minute ago, writing down what you have, creating your budget, knowing where you're at, that's important because you can't determine where you want to go until you have that information, right? So first thing you got to do is you got to determine where you're at and figure out what your long-term goals are. Why long-term versus short-term? Anybody? The market does do better in the long term, absolutely. Because if you're short-term investing in the market, what are you doing essentially? Gambling, absolutely. I tell my clients, and I've been doing this for over 10 years now, I have no idea what the market's going to do. None. Matter of fact, I make you two guarantees with it. I guarantee you two things about the market. The market will go up. Anyone want to take a guess what the other one is? Market will go down. Absolutely will. Unfortunate thing is I don't have that crystal ball or anything telling me to when or how much or anything like that. And nobody has that. So you want to think for the long term because this long term is the time that you have to make these investment decisions that I'm talking about right here. And now I'll give you another little tidbit. I'm going to talk more about it later on. But there's really, when it comes to investing, I don't care the type of account that you have, the type of investment that you have, there's really only two things that make money in the markets. Two things and two things alone. Alexa, you can't answer this. I know you've heard me say it 100 times. What are those two things? I've said one of them already. Time. And who said it? I heard it. Money. Money. Time and money are the only two things that make money in the markets. With that being said, the more you have of either one of them, the more you stand to make while investing. So think about it like this. Young, just now getting out of school, I'm starting to save, I'm starting to get things put together. I'm going to retire in 40 years. Well, guess what? You may not have a lot of money right now. Why? Because you just got out of high school, you just got out of college, or just got out of whatever. You're starting your journey. But what do you have a lot of? Time, absolutely. Now I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit. If we're on the other side of that spectrum, we don't have a lot of time, it's going to take more money. Now, I'm not going to say it takes a lot of money. I'm saying it's going to take more money, okay? So don't freak out on me already. All right, so like I said, we want to focus on what our long-term goals are. We know how much time we have to invest. We know what our goals are going to be. So with that being said, if we know where we want to be and we know what we want to do, we'll have a good idea for how much we're going to need, right? So that will kind of tell us how much we need to do over time. And through Edward Jones, we obviously recommend that you be specific and write down that strategy. Whatever that strategy is going to be, write it down. Rule number 2. I mentioned a second ago, there's risk involved, right? When you put money into any type of investment, there's risk. Why? Because the market will do what? Go up and go down, exactly. So I often have times clients will come and they'll say, Jason, I've got X number of dollars and I want to have this in 6 months or a year or 2 years, 3 years, whatever. You got to be realistic. That's the other thing too. You got to be realistic and understand what the risk return ratio is. And a lot of times the higher return or potential that you want, that's more risk you have to take, right? But risk goes just beyond, when I talk about risk, are we talking about just the market fluctuations or debits or anything like that? Everything. I would argue that there's a risk in everything. Not specifically in this case, let's say you are 45 years old and I want to retire at 65, but I have no plan. I have nothing I'm doing. I'm saving some money. I'm putting some stuff aside over here. But when I retire, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. Is there not a risk that I'm taking right now? Because I want to do X, Y, Z, but I'm not doing anything to get me where I want to get to. Is that not a risk in itself? It absolutely is. So you have to take some type of risk somewhere. Now, what that risk looks like for everybody is different, and it depends on your personal situation. But I just say this to illustrate that there's different types of risk when it comes to investing, not just what we hear and see on MSNBC, CBS, ABC, all the alphabet news organizations about how bad the markets are, right? Don't worry, I'm going to touch on that too. Understanding risk and how you address it can help avoid what is the biggest risk you face, which is not achieving your long-term goals. Sorry, I had to read that part because I just thought that was an impactful statement. That brings me to rule number 3. You want to diversify for a solid foundation. Diversification is key. Believe me, when I say it right now, look at what's going on in the markets today. 99% of my clients, and I say this, I'm everything that I can, markets are down 10% roughly year to date. They've come back up a little bit, but most of my clients, yes, they may be a little negative, but they're not with the market. Why? Because they have a well-diverse portfolio. The thing you have to understand about markets in any investment out there, it's cyclical. And what I mean by that is what goes up must come down, and what goes down will go. So you keep saying that a lot, goes up and down, ups and down. That's because everything does. And just because like right now the market as a whole may be down, guess what? Energy's up. Consumer staples are up. International holdings are up. I'm talking real time. So you want to have a well-diversified portfolio, and because honestly, that's the foundation of it. And I have some clients that are feeling this right now too. I have a lot that come in and they'll say, Jason, I like tech. I like NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple. I want all my investments in tech because that's where the money is. And I warn them, hey, that's not a good idea, but some of them, hey, I'm going to do it anyway. Okay. And when the markets were good, guess what? They were doing really well. They were smiling. But during this downturn, what's been the biggest sector hit? Tech. So all of those clients are not real happy right now. And then I have to revisit this conversation with them to say, hey, remember when I said that we need to diversify, we need to have some things spread out? Well, This is it right here. How many of you heard the expression, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket? Boom, there you go. Right there. So the key takeaway from that is, yes, I may like certain particular investments, but you want to have a little bit of everything, right? Because what that does is it creates a smoother ride for you. I'm sorry? Sleep better at night. Oh, man, I'm glad you said that. You're taking my phrases right from me. I ain't even got a chance to get to it yet. But yeah, absolutely. You get to sleep better at night because instead of your portfolio going like this, it may be a little, it's still going to do that, but it's not as all over the place. Does that make sense? All right. And if there's anything I'm going on that you guys have a question on, feel free. Throw a hand, sling something at me, whatever. I'll slow down. I'll stop. All right. Rule number 4. Stick with quality. Stick with quality. How many of y'all heard of cryptos? Bitcoin, Ethereum. Now, my man said he's trading on some right now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm not going to sit here and say that crypto is bad, but there is a higher level risk with crypto. So when I'm saying stick with quality, let's stick with what works. Does that sound good? Let's stick with what we know, what has been tried and true. Who are our blue chip dividend paying stocks? Who are the interests without high credit ratings? You get what I'm saying here? Let's stick with quality. Exactly. You want to stick with those type qualities. Now, with that being said, let's say you just mentioned one that I hear of a lot, IBM. Good company, solid growth over the years, solid dividends over the years. But am I going to put all my money in that? Absolutely not, because what does Rule 3 tell us? We got to diversify, right? So we got to do that. But we're going to stick with that diversity with quality investments, right? So the thing is about quality, long story short, when we're looking for quality in investments, I'm looking for something that has that long-term track record, kind of like what I was just talking about. Now, that being said, I can't say what's going to happen in the future based off the past, but we can learn from our history, right? Absolutely. And it kind of gives us a good idea as to which way things are going. All right. Moving on. Rule number 5, invest for the long term. And I highlighted this one specifically here. One of the biggest mistakes investors make is trying to time the market. Now, can you time the market? I would actually argue that you can. But here's the flip side of that. I got to put a big asterisk next to it. That's if you're a trader. If you know how to trade stocks and read candle charts and all that good stuff, you can, with some degree of accuracy, somewhat time the market. Now, what am I using there? Somewhat, possibly, could, maybe. Now, with that being said, I'm going to flip the script on you a little bit. Let's say I'm that financial advisor. You come to sit down and talk with me. And I say, hey, I'm really good at timing the market. I'm going to move your money in and out when I feel like it's right. I might be right. I might not be. I can do it with somewhat degree of accuracy. I'm talking about your life savings. How you feeling? Nope. That's okay. Exactly. You want to think about the long term and not try to time the market, because more often than not, what do most people think of doing when they see markets are where they are right now? Sell. They're panicking. I'm glad you used that word. I'm going to really touch on that in a minute. But that's what most people do when they're trying to time the market. And I always give the Coca-Cola example on this, or I call it the Coca-Cola example. Coca-Cola's doing great, through the roof. I want me some Coca-Cola. Well, what are you doing? You're buying when it's up high. All right, man, Coca-Cola's, it's losing me money left and right. I don't know what's going on. I want out. That's when you're supposed to buy, absolutely. How many of you heard the adage of buy low, sell high? That's exactly. Thank you so much for saying that. When prices dip down And think about it. If we're sticking to our rules here. We ain't even got through all 10, but we're sticking with quality. We've got a plan. We're investing for the long term. Just because something goes down, is that a reason to sell it? Just because something changes or the market took a 10% dip, which happens every year, by the way, is that a reason to sell? No. We want to think about the long term. And the way I always tell people this is, and it's even here highlighted, if something changes in the market and causes the market to go down, but it doesn't change your plans or your long-term perspective, why are we making changes in your portfolio? We've stuck to quality. We believe in the investments we have. Unless we've changed our outlook, there's no reason to make changes, as long as you've done the legwork first. Now, if you just were picking random stocks just because, well, I like to drink Coca-Cola, well, that's not a good plan, and you probably will fail. Does that make sense? Okay. We believe that the most consistently successful investment strategy is to own a well-diversified portfolio in quality investments and plan to own those investments for the long term. Sounds a whole lot like what I just said, right? There we go. Moving right on to rule number 6, which is having realistic expectations. I gave the example earlier. Hey, I've got $100. I'm going to put in $100 a month, and I want to have $100,000 in 6 months. That's not realistic. It's possible, absolutely. Now, if we hit the next big Amazon or the next big whatever, and you get in right at the right time, is it possible to blow up like that? Sure. But is it likely? No. So we want to have those realistic expectations. So we're sticking with quality, we're diversified, and we're having realistic expectations. And the other thing is that I always have to remind people on this is that your expectation of a return should be based on your asset allocation or your diversification of your portfolio. Let me give you a good example. If I have a portfolio that is made up of 100% stocks, everything I have is in the stock market, versus Alexia over here has a portfolio of 50% in the stock market and 50% in bonds that don't return near as much. Over the long term, are we going to have the same returns? No. Mine are going to be higher, depending on the year set. Why? Because everything's in the stock market. I'm taking more risk, right? Whereas if you've got a 50-50 portfolio, if half of it's in the stock market and half of it's in bonds or fixed income, you're exactly right. Bonds don't really move. So it would be bad for you to have the same expectation of these types of returns, or if I'm basing my returns off the S&P 500, which is 100% the stock market, but that's returning 10% and I'm only averaging 5, well, guess what? You're only half in. So you have to have that expectation. Now, am I saying that I think everybody should be in an all-stock portfolio? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. How do we determine that? It's based off of what your risk tolerance is and what your life stage is. Working together with someone like me can help tell you that. What is your risk tolerance? How much should you have invested? Does that make sense? Rule 7, maintaining your balance. This is a big one. This is a really big one. Because the balance of your investments, not just, I kind of touched on it a little bit just with the last example. How much is in the market? How much is in fixed income? Okay, well, let's say the investments that are in the market, how much of it's in tech, like we were talking about? How much of it's in consumer staples, consumer discretionary, energy, real estate? There's all different sectors of the market. And then guess what? There's other investments inside of those sectors. For example, in tech, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Apple, energy, Chevron, Shell, consumer discretionary, Amazon. I'm sure nobody orders anything off Prime. See, I got to throw that out there. Just make sure some people are still with me. Every day. Man, I feel you. I come home to a new box every day. Every day. My wife is, anyway, we won't get into that. She might be watching. Sorry, man. But with that being said, and I see this a lot of times investors, when it comes to investing, will get attached to an investment. Mainly in the last couple of years, how many of y'all heard of a little small chip company called NVIDIA? Yeah, it was up over $200-something a share. Matter of fact, in 2024, it was up almost 200%. Or it may have been more. Don't quote me on that. Well, when you have an investment like that, and you got a guy like me telling you, hey, you may need to rebalance that. Why would I tell you that? Danger is ahead. Man, you just touched on it right there for me. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. What goes up will come down. So it's important, just because, man, and NVIDIA was one of the big ones I had this last year, and I was telling clients, hey, you need to sell some of this. Capture some of those gains. Shave off some earnings there. Well, I don't want to sell it. It's doing so well. Take your profits. What type of decision is that? If I'm telling you, hey, you need to sell something, and you're saying, no, I don't want to because it's done so well. Ooh, I heard the E word. Emotional. See, Alessia, she's got a little bit of a heads up on you guys. She's heard me several times talk about this, so she knew where I was going. Man, I'm so glad to hear you say that. So glad. Because that is actually one of the biggest things that I talk about that I do for clients. I get it. Our money and our children are the closest things to us. Believe me, I'm right there with you. And it's very hard for me to do it in my own life. So I know it's hard for you to do it in yours. So one of the biggest things that I do, and I tell people we got to do, you got to take the emotion out of investing. You have to remove emotion. Because let me just ask this. Rhetorical question here. Don't answer this, especially you, sir. You sit next to her. When's the last time you made a good emotional decision? I will go ahead and tell you, Jason Witcher has never made a good emotional decision. Ever. So what makes you think if you're being emotional about your money, you're making a good decision? You're not. So with that, you want to have those realistic expectations, knowing, okay, I've made some money. Let's shave some of that off and reinvest into something that's maybe not performing as good right now, because why? Markets are what? Cyclical. So if you shave off some gains from something that's done real well for you, and you put the money into something that's not doing so good at the moment, when that market cycle comes around, guess what? Two things are going to happen. One, NVIDIA, look what happened this year. After all those gains last year, what happened in February? It went way down. I looked at it one time. It was trading at 95-something a share after being up over 200. For those mathematicians, that's a 100% drop. It did split, but that's still a big drop. Absolutely. So with that drop, now think about it like this. Let's go back in time a little bit. If you listen to a guy like me in December who was saying, hey, you may want to shave some gains off of this, and you're like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm keeping it. And then next thing you know, it drops down, and your portfolio is worth less than it was when I told you to sell some of it. You see how that works? That's why it's important to maintain your balance in your portfolio, because it's very easy when you're diversified. Because why? Like I said, not all sectors move at the same time. It's very easy to get over-concentrated in something. Make sense? So we want to maintain that balance there. And one of the big highlighting things right here on the page, and I'm going to beat this dead horse all day long, take the emotion out of your investing decisions, period. You have to do that. All right, rule number 8, we are almost there. And some of this Charlene has already talked about with us. Prepare for the unexpected. Prepare for the unexpected. Why? Because it's unexpected. If it was expected, we wouldn't have to prepare for it, right? So how do we do that? First thing, when it comes to investing, I'll tell everybody, you need to have an emergency fund. Create your emergency fund. Jason, how much should I have? Well, that depends. Everybody is different on that. I call that your sleep at night number. Your sleep at night number is the number that you have to have in the bank that you can touch right. I want to be able to swipe a card, write a check, whatever it is I need to do, I got to have access to this money. That is your sleep at night number. And whatever that number is for you, that is okay, because that's your number. Now, I have seen some people with outrageous amounts in the bank, and I've had to talk to them a little bit like, hey, let's maybe reallocate some of this, rebalance some of this, right? Because there's danger in holding cash too, right? Cash holds value, and it also loses value. So there's risk in there again in just keeping money in cash. I got money, but I'm not investing it. Well, you're taking a risk. What happened in 2022? When the markets were down, economy was in the tank, what was inflation? 9-10%? That's a lot. So, preparing for the unexpected. Another thing to do, think about your insurance options. And I'm talking about not just life insurance, but like Charlene was saying, long-term care. There are a multitude of options out there for you guys, for everybody. Especially when it comes to insurance. One little tidbit, I'm going to get off on a little soapbox here. Insurance companies figured out something. Long-term care is expensive. So what do you think they made long-term care insurance? Also expensive, right? So there are all types of policies out there now to where you don't have to just get the long-term care insurance. You can get a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider, chronic illness rider, all types of different riders and stuff like that you can use to solve some of those long-term care needs or to serve final expense needs. I'm actually, believe it or not, I won't get too deep in the weeds on this, but we're using insurance strategies to help people with large IRAs when those get passed on to their children, to help offset some of those taxes. So like I said, there are a number of strategies out there. You just have to pick which one's right for you. And the last one on here, as far as preparing for your unexpected, Charlene's really going to love me for this one. Plan your estate. I'm going to say that again. Plan your estate. The reason I say it like that, and I'm putting as much emphasis on it, is because Charlene's sitting right. No, I'm just kidding. No, the reason for real that I'm doing that is because I see it every day. And I tell clients every day, hey, you need to be doing this. Put these beneficiaries on your account. What's your estate plan? What if something happens to you? What if something happens to you and your spouse at the same time? That's the number one thing. Oh, my wife will handle it, or oh, my husband will handle it. None of us are promised tomorrow. None of us. So, going back to the verses here, what are we supposed to do? Provide, right? And if you are not putting these plans in place, you are not providing. It's just that simple. I'll get off that soapbox. Number 9, focus on what you can control. Focus on what you can control. There are some things we cannot control. What's one of them? Death. We're just talking about it. We don't know when it's coming. Taxes? Well, we know when those are coming. We can't control it. They're going to keep going up, and they're going to keep coming after us. That's about the only thing we know we could do. But we can plan for these things. We know these things are coming. We just don't know when. So we have to plan for them, right? The other thing is, and this is the big one that I'm hearing a lot right now, and I kind of touched on it already, the market. We can't control what the market's going to do. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. But what we can do is plan for it. And like I said earlier, if just because the market's going down, does that change what I want to do? Does that change how I want to retire? Does that change what I want to leave to my youngins or to my, apparently my grand-youngins as well? It doesn't change that. So why am I going to change my plan? Stick to the plan because I know that I'm hitting the other steps, right? Which takes me to rule number 10, which is review your strategy regularly. That's a big one. Big one, big one. A lot of times I'll have clients, they come to me, we start a plan, we get it in process, and we're going. And they're making their monthly contributions to their accounts, and they think, oh, I'm good. I don't need to talk to Jason no more. Jason's got it. But you didn't tell me about you buying a new house. You didn't tell me about getting married. You didn't tell me about having a child. You didn't tell me about getting fired. A lot can change in a year's time, right? I just named off 4 or 5 of ones that change like that, and guess what? Your financial future is completely changed. So it's important if you're working with somebody to have that person know those things so that they can continue to give you good advice. What I tend to tell people when it comes to me as a financial advisor, think about it like this. When you go to your doctor, let's say everybody's, and this actually just recently happened with me, my primary care doctor passed away. And this is kind of what gave me this analogy to give to you guys. So my primary care doctor passed away, and I had to go to a new primary care doctor. I walked in there. This guy didn't know me from Adam. I actually had a headache that day. Could he have just given me something, sent me a prescription, sent me on my way? I mean, he could have. Would it have been very good practice? No, absolutely not. What do doctors want to know? Your family history. What are you currently taking? What are you allergic to? All that stuff, right? Money is no different. Your life is no different when it comes to stuff like that when you're working with an advisor. So whether you're working with an advisor or not, these are all things that you have to take into consideration when it comes to reviewing your strategy. Because sometimes life happens, right? And a lot of times life happens hard and fast. And in those times is when we may need to make an adjustment to our strategy. Not reacting to the markets, but something has changed in your life that causes us to have to make a change. Does that make sense? So, one constant you can always expect is what? Change is always going to happen, so it's there. So those are the top 10, or I'm going back to Letterman days, I'm dating myself here, 10 rules for investing. And I went through those kind of fast because I understand there's going to be several questions, but I do want to touch on one more thing before we get to questions. Everybody should have this sheet right in front of you as well. I just wanted you guys to see something. To me, and we've had something similar to this in the last 10 years since I've been with Ever Jones, but this is our latest piece on it. And to me, this is the most impactful piece that anybody can see who is not investing, who needs to start. If you take a look on this sheet right here, this front page right here that's got the blue and the yellow on here, it talks about what the difference 3 years can make. And what this is doing is assuming a hypothetical of 7% rate of return, and you're putting in $7,000 a year. Why is $7,000 important? Anybody? That's the maximum amount that you can put into an IRA every year. So let's assume that you're putting in $7,000 per year. Now, if you're over age 50, you get a $1,000 catch-up, and that's also included in this. But let's say you started at age 30, assuming the market had an average rate of return of 7%, by age 65, you would have that $1 million number there. But if you waited just 3 years to age 33 to do the exact same thing, take a look at what you got. Now, here's why I really like this. You can do this and move it all the way down the list. Look at the next blue one at 35. You cost yourself almost $300,000 by waiting 3 years. If you wait 10 years, you've cost yourself half of what you could have had. And if you wait till 43, you got a third of what you could have had. If you flip this piece of paper over, you'll see on the back there, I mentioned 2 things that make money in the markets, and that's it. Time and money. That's it. Those are the only 2 things. And the finishing to that saying that I added, this isn't a Jonesism, this is a Jasonism, so, patent pending. 2 things make money in the markets, time and money. The more of either one of them you have, the more you stand to make. It's just that simple. And if you take a look at right down there at the bottom, you will see the difference between starting at age 25 and age 55, how much per month it would take you to reach $1 million. So I'm going to just read this out for those at home. At age 25, if you were to save $405 a month, you would have $1 million by 65. If you wait till age 55, That number goes to $5,846 per month to have $1 million by 65. You see how the time and money equation works now? With that, I'm going to be quiet and take questions. Yes, sir. Set it and forget it. So for those who couldn't hear, the question was, there's a lot of people that say when it comes to investing, buy things like VOO or QQQ, QQQM or VTI, something like that. And what those are index traded funds or exchange traded funds. I can't say whether or not they're good or bad investments, obviously, because I don't know your personal history. But what I can say is investing in something is better than doing nothing. And I would say to that question there, make sure you know your risk, know what you're getting invested in. But those investments are a very good way to get instant diversification in a broader market. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? All right. Yes, sir.
For folks who may have, let's say, a 401k through their employer, would you recommend that they focus primarily on their 401k or also take some funds and invest outside?
Excellent question. Thank you so much for asking that. Question was, do we focus on 401ks or take some money and invest outside? I have a saying that I do with my clients, and I'll tell every single one of them this. If you have a 401k at your job and you're going to invest any amount of money, make sure you are getting that match first. Why? Well, Jason, doesn't that take money out of your accounts with you at your branch? Yes, it absolutely does, but it's better for you. Here's why. If I'm your employer and I'm telling you that for every dollar you put into your 401k, up to 3% of what you make with me, I'm going to give you another dollar, which is how most 401ks work, right? You have just made a 100% return on your investment without investing it at all. You see what I'm saying? So if you're not getting that match at your job with your 401k, you're leaving money on the table. Now, with that being said, there are a couple more strategies I do tend to go into. Once you, Jason, my employer is matching me 3%, I'm putting all 3% in. I want to put in more. That's when I encourage you to come talk with me, because then we can start getting into more advanced strategies as to, okay, is it better for you to put into your 401k? Do they have a Roth option? Would you prefer to have a Roth IRA? Would it be better for you to have a brokerage account? There's a number of different strategies that you can go into, but I can't unfortunately give that advice because I got to know about your personal situation. But excellent question there. Yes, I always encourage when you have money and you're putting into a 401k, get that match. Does that answer your question? I'll add one more real quick on that. If you have a 401k at a job or an employer and you leave that employer, take your money with you. Do not leave it in that former 401k. And I say that whether you take, I'll put to you guys, it's like this. I have a couple of 401ks that I'm the investment manager on, and I'm telling you guys exactly what I tell the employees of the very plans that I manage. Take your money with you. Whether you bring it to me and put it in an IRA or you roll it into a new 401k, whatever you do not leave it with your previous employer. And there's a whole plethora of reasons for that I could give you another hour presentation on, but I won't waste your time on that. Just take my word on it. If you want me to get into it with you, I'll be happy to tell you after hours.
That was the question I wanted to ask. But if I leave my 401k there,
I'll repeat it if it's fine.
if I leave my 401k there,
Mm-hmm.
does the employer still give you that 3%?
Excellent question. So the question was, if you leave your 401k at your previous employer, will that employer still give you the 3% or whatever match they were giving you? And the answer is no. Because why? You're not putting anything into it anymore, so they're not putting anything into it. That's number one. But another thing that I tend to tell people on that is, when you're invested in a 401k at your employer, You're putting money in and they're putting money in, right? So it's a benefit to you, okay? But once you leave that employer, you're no longer putting money into that plan, right? So they're no longer putting money into that plan either. But guess what else? While you're still an employee there, who's paying for that plan? The employer, right? But when you're no longer employed there anymore, most times, it isn't every time, but most times, guess who starts paying for your account? You do. And here's another thing. You don't see it on your statements. Why? Because it just comes out of your returns. Well, my statement says I made 9% last year. Well, you probably made 8 if you don't work there anymore. Just throwing that out there. That's not the case in every single plan, but in a lot of plans it is. And the other thing I'll say on that is, how many people know what you're invested in inside your 401s? You can only invest in the options that they give you in the little box, right? So let me get this straight. You mean I'm having to pay for my plan now, and I can't invest in what I want to invest in? Why would I leave my money there? Make sense? Does that answer your question? Thank you.
What about an investment that you, say for instance, you make an investment for 20 years ago, and that investment in itself maybe double or a little over, and you reach a certain age, do you leave it there?
So the question was, if you make an investment and over time it grows and it's maybe even doubled or tripled, or let's say it's quadrupled, depending on the type of account that you're in will determine when you have to take it out. For example, if it's in a 401k or a traditional IRA, the government says you got to start taking that money out through what's called required minimum distributions. RMDs is what they're commonly referred to. Most people, it happens somewhere between 70 and 75. And I say that because there's a tiered list as to when it's going to hit everybody, but general rule, somewhere between 70 and 75, you're going to have to start taking what's called those required minimum distributions from those accounts. Now, I saw you shake your head. It's not in a 401k. It's in a brokerage account. Nope, you don't have to take that money out anytime. That's your money to keep there. Now, I would recommend you talk with someone like myself, because they can give you additional strategies, or I could give you additional strategies to help mitigate some of those taxes. Because if you have an investment in a brokerage account, it's subject to capital gains taxes. And depending on how long you've had that investment, it may be advantageous or it may not be advantageous to sell it. So does that answer your question?
Are you familiar with a thing they call Lifetime 5?
I'm sorry?
Lifetime 5.
Lifetime 5. That's not ringing a bell. It may be something that's inside of a 401k. Is that what you're talking about, or?
No, it's not a 401k.
Uh-huh.
It's stock, but it's not the aggressive one. And you can start, if say for instance, I want to start taking it, I can start taking it, and they'll say you can take 15,000 per year for life.
Yep. Okay, so what it sounds like you're talking about is an annuity product. Those are very, very common in brokerage accounts, and I do work with annuities as well. Unfortunately, I can't give specific advice about an annuity because it has to talk about your specific situation. Thank you. And I just can't talk about it in a public forum. So, but I'll be happy if another thing on the back of this sheet right here, down at the bottom, that little guy there in the bottom corner there, believe it or not, that is me. See, look, she was over there. She was like, them two had a bet over there going. She's like, I told you that was him. Yes, that is me from several years ago when I actually still had hair. I'm too cheap to just update my picture. Okay, I'm going to get it done. But yes, that is me. It's also got my contact information. If any of you have any additional questions, you can reach out to me, and I'll talk to you about your personal situation. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am.
What's the difference between a 401k and a 403b?
Excellent question. So the question was, for anyone who didn't hear, what is the difference between a 401k and a 403b? For all intents and purposes, absolutely nothing. But I'll give you the legal version of it. You know, the IRS, great people. They're real creative. So when they come out with a rule, they simply just name it after whatever subsection it is. So if you look in the IRS code, section 401, subsection K, guess what it describes? Employer retirement plans. Well, if you look in section 403, subsection B, what do you think it talks about? The same thing, has the same rules, same everything else as a 401k, but it's talking more with, if you're 403B, you're probably either in education or the medical field or something along those lines. Those tend to have more 403Bs as opposed to 401ks. But for all intents and purposes, when you roll it over, it all goes into a traditional IRA, unless it's a Roth. Does that answer your question?
Also, when do you get what they call it, from the employee? The match.
So when do you
From
get
the
a match
employer.
from your employer? All right, so the question was, is when do you get a match from your employer? Well, that really depends on the type plan that you have. And you can have it in a 401k, 403b, any of those will give. Most 403bs aren't going to have them. But if the employer says that they want to give a match, they can do that. Now, just because you have a 401k or a 403b or an employer-sponsored plan, that does not mean that they have to give a match. I have some plans that I manage as well that they don't give a match. But a lot of employers use them as additional tools for keeping employees. So anyone that I set up or that I help manage, I strongly recommend the employers to give some type of match as an incentivization. Yes, sir. Absolutely. The statement was made that anybody who, typically when you first start a job, you're going to get that information right up front. And a lot of times what a job will do, or what a lot of employers will do, is make you wait. So with those plans there, it's really up to the employer. What most of them do, and I encourage this as well, because think about it like this. If an employer is going to give you a match to their plan, they want you to have some skin in the game, right? They want to make sure that they're giving their resources to a good employee who's going to stay and be, with them. So in order to ensure that they're doing that for good, solid, quality employees, I may say something like, let's put 6-month waiting period or a 12-month waiting period on here before you're eligible to get said match. Or other employers may do something that's called vesting, meaning you have to stay, we'll give you the match up front, but you got to stay with us X number of years for you to be 100% eligible to receive all of what we gave you. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yes, concerning retirement fund.
Mm-hmm.
In one instance, some of them, when you read, they say you can take it until you're 59 and a half.
Correct.
You take it before, they charge you a 33 and a third %. But after that 59 and a half, do you still get return on that?
Excellent question. So the question was when you're contributing to a retirement account, if you take it before age 59 and a half, you get penalized. Whereas if you take it after age 59 and a half, there's no penalty, but depending on the type of account it's in, whether it be a 401k, and this is where I was saying how they all relate to be the same, a 401k, 403b, traditional IRA, all of that money that went in was pre-tax dollars, meaning that Uncle Sam has not taken his portion of that. So the benefit of it is you put that money in tax-free, or without tax, or pre-tax dollars, it grows tax deferred, but then when you hit that retirement age, what's Uncle Sam want? Hey, I let you put this money in. I didn't take your taxes for 20, 30 years. It's time to pay up. Got to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Bingo. So If you have another type of account that I tend to recommend for people, it's called a Roth IRA. Depending on your situation, I'm not saying this is right for everybody. However, the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, keep in mind, a traditional IRA, that is what we roll pre-tax dollars into, right? Because we want to keep taxes the same throughout. So with that being said, if Uncle Sam's going to take money in retirement because we put pre-tax dollars in the account and that grew tax deferred, what if we put post-tax dollars in an account, money that I've already paid taxes on? Then you could put that money into what's called a Roth IRA. It continues to grow tax deferred just like a traditional IRA, but the difference is because you use post-tax dollars to begin with, every single dollar that comes out in retirement comes out 100% tax-free. Does that answer your question?
So you're saying like the retirement, the money that is in the retirement fund, I can transfer that to the Roth IRA? No. Well,
you can, but think about this. If you have money in a 401k and you roll that over into a traditional IRA, and I'm just going to use round numbers here. Let's say it's $100,000. And you put that $100,000 into a traditional IRA. And you're like, nope, I don't want it in that. I want it in a Roth IRA. You can do that. But you're going to pay taxes on all 100,000 of those dollars. Because you can't get around that one. We've already talked about that one. Taxes are a surety. We're going to pay some of it. And if you try to do it that way, you won't pay a penalty, but you will pay taxes on every one of those dollars before it converts to the Roth. Yep. I know, I wish I could do it too, man. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. I think I get what you're saying.
Sorry. I'm going to pay taxes on the dividend. I'm going to also pay tax on the money I put on my contribution. Yeah, that's my word. Yeah, right?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
So when it comes to taxes, every account is taxed differently. All right? So if you have your money in a brokerage account, just a regular savings account, and you're investing money, and let's say you got some of that IBM stock we were talking about. Why? Because it pays good dividends. Yeah. Well, if you've got that dividend-paying stock in your brokerage account, you're going to pay, like we were talking about earlier, with the capital gains taxes, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. But if you have that same investment in a retirement account, whether it be a traditional IRA, Roth IRA, 401, 403, whatever, if it's in what's called a qualified account, you don't pay taxes on those dividends.
Well, that's beautiful, yeah.
But when you take that money out of the account, you're paying ordinary income taxes if it's a traditional 401 or 403, whereas in a Roth account, you don't pay any taxes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense, yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, yeah.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
At his age, he's going to be paying penalty if he takes it.
If you take any money out of a Roth let me back that up for a second because there is an exception. But in most cases, when you take money out of a Roth prior to age 59 and a half, you're going to pay a 10% penalty. Now, there are exceptions to that, so please don't quote me on that. There are exceptions. But again, that's on a personal level. Anyone else? Well, guys, this has been great. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you guys. Like I said, if you have any other follow-up questions or anything that you want, jason.witcher@edwardjones.com, or I think that may be on here. If it's not, okay, well, it's not. Just first name, last name @Edward Jones, and my phone number is on there as well. One more. Okay, I think we have a couple extra copies right up here. So thank you guys so much.
So I must say, we have been schooled, we've been educated, we've been provided some, amazing information that we can put into action, right? Like right now, okay? There's an urgency to put this into action because these are all protective information. These are all proactive information. It's not reactive. And so we want to make sure that we are protecting our families, our children's children. So we want to make sure we do that. Thank you all for coming out. It's been a series of wonderful sessions. Hopefully you have taken the information and applied it to your households. And just continue to be the ripple in your circle, right? Because it just takes one. It takes one to get the information and just live by example. And so everyone else around you will kind of see how, okay, we're learning from this individual. So it only takes one person to create a ripple. So this is the last session. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed coming out here. It has been a great, experience for me in terms of refreshing my memory and refreshing my things, and have prompted me to look. I went and made an appointment with Jason. I was like,